Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay.
Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay. I am your host, Mike Jokum. Matt joins me. We have plenty in the Formula One world news-wise to discuss this week as we near the just over a month, I think 5 or 6 weeks-ish until the season finally starts. So let's start with the easy one, and I'm not going to do Matt's fancy pronunciation here, but to the surprise of absolutely nobody, Sir Lewis Hamilton signed his contract renewal for one more year. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that, or should we just continue on?
Say something about Sir Lewis Hamilton?
Yes, that.
Oh, yeah. I will say the statements released by Toto and Lewis were both, I guess maybe more Toto's, was, we'll say, ambiguous and calls into question maybe the future of Mercedes in Formula One, given, Mercedes' behind-the-scenes shift in their culture and push for renewable energy and whatnot. So that was confusing / intriguing. And yeah, 1-year deal. I would still love to see Lewis race for just like a non-Ferrari or Red Bull team maybe one more time before his career ends. But just get him off the biggest team. It's getting a little annoying.
Yeah, I agree there. It's definitely interesting, and maybe this is a topic for another day, but all these manufacturers are talking about renewable energy, et cetera, in terms of what that's going to do for motorsports in general, not just Formula One, but IndyCar and probably NASCAR at some point, and sports car racing. I was trying to think of another form of racing, and I almost drew a blank. But we'll save that for another day. The one thing that I guess was of note and was rumored before the renewal came up, but then is not in the contract, is Lewis Hamilton's ability to veto the second driver. So what do you think? I know where I stand on this, but should that be something that is even like a thought? Like should drivers be able to go to teams and say, hey, this is what I want, and it be okay for them to say, I'm going to go to another team then?
What do you think I'm going to say?
I don't know. Listen, I don't know. I hope you agree with me. If not, we might have to end this episode early.
I'm an old man shouting at clouds kind of person. So of course, I think that a driver should never be allowed to veto a team decision when it comes to signing somebody, because, and I think it was Damon Hill who shared it on Twitter, and it was just a rumor. He said in his tweet, just a rumor, but obviously it gets people talking. And my thoughts is if you're a 7-time Formula One champion and statistically the greatest driver in the history of the sport that's been around for officially organized 70 years, but more close to 90 years, you should not fear anybody, especially the Mercedes junior driver who's been driving for Williams for, what is it been coming on now, his third full year?
Yes.
So you should not fear George Russell. If you're Lewis Hamilton, you are the alpha dog of the whole pack, and you should be able to take whatever Mercedes throws at you. So I'm glad that there's not a veto clause in there. I know there have been veto clauses in the past with a certain Schumacher-ness, but I am glad that there is not one in this contract, because I think it should be up to Mercedes to put whoever they want in that second seat, and Lewis is just going to have to deal with it no matter who it is.
Yeah, when I first found out that Michael Schumacher had that ability, whenever it was a number of years ago, I was very sad because I grew up a big Michael Schumacher fan. I wish this is one of those things that they'd add into like the sporting code. Like, this is not allowed in a contract. Just put it out there so that drivers and teams can't even make it a discussion point.
Yep, I totally agree. All right, so speaking of kind of past events and whatnot, continuing on with my watch along on the Formula One past, I'm on the 2009 season, and I got thinking that, next year, obviously there's a cosmic shift in the landscape of Formula One, mainly with what the cars are going to look like and new rules and etc. And so, obviously in Formula One, there's been some major shifts to monocoque chassis, to gearboxes that are automatic / semi-automatic instead of a 6-gear shift. There's been groove tires, smooth tires, new chassis types, new suspensions, active suspensions. And then more so in the modern era, we had some major shifts with the mass damper. But the largest shift by far in recent memory, other than, eventually again in 2017, was the change in the aerodynamics. So from 2008, the cars were a little wide, groove tires, and had all sorts of aerodynamic bits hanging off the car. And then switching to 2009, none of those aerodynamic bits were allowed anymore. Their rear wings got a lot smaller. Their tires became smaller, and they were no longer grooved. They were back to smooth tire. And then you got, this, that, the next thing, you got KERS, you got a whole bunch of changes. And eventually in the next year, DRS. So in 2008, teams knew that were going to happen. And everybody basically adapted their 2007 car, except for Toyota, which is a subject we'll save for another episode on the horrible mismanagement of Toyota. But so Toyota built a brand new car, didn't help, obviously, and everybody else kind of updated their car. And about 4 rounds into the year, you could kind of tell, like, okay, we got a shot to win a race or two, versus like, let's pack it in and move on to our 2009 car, which was what Honda did. And Honda turned into Braun, and Braun came out of the gate swinging and eventually won driver and constructor titles. So my question to you is, we're going to be kind of in that territory again with this year. You got 2021, 10% downforce reduction and very small, but I'll say impactful rule changes coming this year, but nothing from the eye that is going to look too much different from the outside world. You may have Mercedes come out and be battling with Red Bull right away. And you may have a team like Williams or Haas, who are just in the back of the grid. So if you are a team owner / team manager this year, at what point in the season do you kind of say, you know what, developing the car this year is only going to get us so far. Let's pack it in and focus on 2022.
Should I give a serious answer, or should I just start making fun of teams?
You can accomplish both with one answer.
Yes. If I am Haas and Williams and I know I have secure funding into the following year, get done the first race, I'm already looking towards 2022. We know Williams isn't going to score any points, most likely. Maybe they'll get lucky this year. Haas probably going to be right down there at the bottom. Alfa Romeo, those kind of lower tier teams are going to be at the bottom. If the whole car is changing, why don't you get a leg up? I mean, Williams is going to might actually have rich energy money. So we could have a lot of fun in the future with Williams, especially this year. So if I'm a mid-tier team, maybe half to 2/3 of the way through the season, when I start to see, if I see that the top 3 in the constructors is not feasible, I'm looking towards 2022. I think top 3 or top 4 is like, wherever that falls in the season, and maybe there's like okay, it might be feasible, but I've hit 12 out of, or I've hit 14 out of 23 races. We're done developing the car for the year already. So somewhere around there. I know that's a kind of a long, winded answer, but yeah.
Well, my question was like 2 minutes long, so don't worry. On the flip side, for 2022, and I know this is a way too early prediction, do you see the teams that do well and develop their car this season starting on the back foot for 2022? Like Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, etc.
No, probably not. I mean, Mercedes and Red Bull are Mercedes and Red Bull for a reason. They're probably already kind of planning, doing what they can behind the scenes to get ready for it. So would I be worried about Mercedes in 2022 if they wait longer to develop a car than Williams? No, not at all.
Yeah, because 2009 was definitely weird. Honda sucked, Red Bull sucked, and there wasn't really a clear number 3 team in 2009, kind of like maybe Ferrari a little bit, but Ferrari is still, while they weren't blisteringly quick, they're still Ferrari. They still got the skill. But so in 2008, Honda and Red Bull sucked. And then immediately in 2009, it was clear that it was going to be one of those two teams that did it. And then, there was another major chassis change and aerodynamic change in 2017, but for reasons that I'll get to when I get to those seasons, it was still Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, just like it had been for a while. So I'm not entirely sure why 2016 everybody just came out and was business as usual. So, and who knows? Maybe 2022 comes around and it's Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull again. But I do think there's definitely a window for some of these teams to have a good shot at maybe moving up on the grid.
I think the bonus money you get from moving up as constructors is super important, especially if you're a McLaren who you sold part of your factory, and I think you have a new part owner or something along those lines. I forget, or they got new financing, etc., or all of the above. You might try to hang on to 2021 a little bit longer, but at some point you still have to worry about the future and not just 2022, but 2022 and that entire next group of years with the new everything. So at some you have to still be logical about not screwing your future up at the same time and as what's going on in the current year.
Yeah, and yes, a lot has happened since 2008, but that was the last time Ferrari won a constructors title. So, they just did not seem to come up to speed as quickly as Red Bull, obviously, in the major shift there. And then ever since then, it's been kind of trying to play catch up to Mercedes in the V6 era. So, anyways, just wanted to get your thoughts on that. So, some more news to run through here. Portimao is allegedly going to be the TBC spot on the schedule. We still have one race that needs to be confirmed, but there is a rise in COVID cases in Portugal, so that race is looking a bit in doubt at this point. And so Formula One is considering a second race in Bahrain again. I'm assuming you'd be completely fine with another outer loop race.
You stole the words right out of my mouth. If we get a second Sakira Grand Prix, I will get up at 3:00 in the morning or whatever, and whatever we need to do to make it happen. I'm all for it. I obviously would love to see Portimao on the schedule because it's a fantastic track, but I wouldn't be upset if there was a second Bahrain race.
Yeah.
As long as it's not the same normal layout.
Yes, correct. And selfishly, I have a good feeling that the outer loop will be added to the next Formula One game. But if
also agreed.
But Portimao, if it's not on the schedule, will probably not be on the game. So selfish me wants to just go to Portimao more. Well, it's a phenomenal track. It was a really fun track last year, but selfish me wants it on the Formula One game next year too. So let's hope that not only in Portugal, but around the world that, with the vaccinations and whatnot, COVID goes down a little bit here and we can kind of get back to somewhat normal in fall. A weird one that I found on Motorsports this week was that, and it is relevant, the Olympic Committee, and I'm not an expert, unfortunately, in the matter, but there are like 57 committees within the Olympics that review how long your fingernails are and this, that, and the next thing. And one of the big ones, obviously, as I'm joking, but one of the big ones is doping. And for those who don't know, Russia got hit pretty hard with some doping rulings against them in, I believe, 2014 when it was in Sochi. And because of that, they now have to run under a neutral flag for several Olympics in a row. And this is actually now extended to Formula One, which is weird because, to my memory, Sergei Sorokin, I think, was the last Russian driver, and he got to run under a Russian flag. And then Haas's second driver in F2 has been able to run under a Russian flag. But anyways, the moral of the story is that...
What about Kvyat?
Oh, you're right, yeah.
How could you forget my man, the Torpedo?
The Torpedo has been running under the Russian flag. So he got out right in time then, I guess. Because now, for the next 2 seasons, Russian drivers in Formula One are not allowed to run under the Russian flag. They have to run under a neutral flag, which means Haas's second driver will be running under a neutral flag this season. Not sure if you have any thoughts or if you care about that at all.
Yeah, I've been following it for Olympic hockey. I know the Russian team might not be able to participate, and they're usually really good. And I think I saw the Summer Olympics, like, you can't have like a track and field team. It's just like individual people entering or something crazy like that. So I've been kind of in the loop on what's going on. I don't know how the FIA got looped into there. The article kind of made my head spin a little bit, but it's kind of ironic we're calling him Haas' second driver, and now he doesn't even get to say he's from Russia. I feel like it's very fitting right now. And otherwise, not really much. It doesn't change much other than if he somehow if he won the race, they wouldn't be able to play the Russian national anthem, and that's not going to happen anyway. So we can move on. I'm going to get to a couple of these easier ones. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if he somehow does win a race, I hope his national anthem is and then they just call it good.
Maybe we should just play like highlights of like the Xbox races that you do.
Oh God, that would not be good. And then my only other comment is if this somehow impacted the Russian Grand Prix, that'd be fantastic. Like, oh, sorry, Olympic athletes got caught doping, so we have to take your Grand Prix away from you. Like, oh no, not at Sochi. Oh, what a bummer. Oh, now everybody's gonna miss that race.
I'd be losing sleep for weeks. Let me tell you, weeks.
Oh, a whole week or just weeks, plural?
Weeks, multiple plural weeks.
That sucks. All right. Anyways,
so we're gonna hit a couple easy ones here, and then round it out with the longer-winded one. There is a chance that we may see sprint races this year, says F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali. He did say that reverse grids are completely off the table. Don't even think about it. It's done. But we're still looking at the so-called sprint race on Saturday. They're trying to figure out if there's a way it could be tested this year and run this year. And they want essentially to try to think of a way to showcase F1 drivers and its new drivers. And it's kind of hard to do so with the limited amount of testing and practice they get currently. So I'm just going to leave it open-ended there. What are your thoughts?
I don't mind, I guess. I'm all for trying new things. You know, if they do it for a season and just like, well, this sucked, you can always revert back. There's no saying that we have to do this forever. So if there's ever a time to try it, I mean, last year and this year would probably be it. You know, we'd hate to ruin something good when, you know, fans can come to the track and everything right in the world and whatnot. But in this day and age, let's try it. Who cares? If it's fun, it's fun. If it sucks, we don't have to do it again in 2022. And I'll give F1 credit. They've been super receptive to fan feedback the last couple of years. Obviously, there are exceptions like Haas's second driver, but for the most part, they're a lot more engaged in what the fans are looking for. So, you know, I have faith that if it doesn't work out, they'll always, you know, can just revert back.
Yeah, I mean, they tried no pit stops for a year and went back, so it can't be as bad as that.
Yeah, they did the double points for 1 year on the finale, and they afterwards are like, yeah, that was a bad call. So, I could see them, you know, going back if it doesn't work out.
More good news: the F1 track that was kind of proposed to be built in Rio, I believe, which was
around.
kind of agreed upon, is no more, and the contract to keep the race in Sao Paulo is good to go and will now be known as the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. So yay for that. I don't think there's really too much to add there.
Just it's a win. It's a win for, I think, everybody.
Yay environment.
And now I'm in this weird phase where every time I see the word Rio, I think of Money Heist on Netflix. If anybody hasn't seen,
I haven't gotten there yet.
Have you never seen the first? Well, the first season is phenomenal. One of the characters is named Rio. So, Mike, if you haven't watched it, I would definitely recommend it.
Well, we just finished Homeland, so I need a new show to watch. So
Money Heist.
That'll jump the list. The second part of this story is F1 is still looking for a second United States race. I've seen Miami mentioned, which is scary because I don't think that looks exciting at all. We have this beautiful place in Indianapolis that would really like an F1 race and would be really cool. So are you cool with the second U.S. race? Do you think it's a good idea? I know COTA hasn't necessarily made the best of races. Would you like to see COTA moved instead of a second U.S. race? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes to a second race. For the love of God, Indianapolis, please. Please. Or if not Indianapolis, pick a venue that we already have, for God's sakes. We have so many good tracks in America. You don't need to be inventing one in downtown Miami. No. We don't need like another Sochi or Vietnam. We have I know their facilities are out of date. I know, please don't throw bricks at me. But we have Watkins Glen and Road America and what else we got? VIR, Petit Le Mans. Laguna Seca would be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, especially like Indianapolis is the one out of the ones that you mentioned that I don't think would even need like facilities upgrades to meet.
Yep, they got it. They're good to go. So it's like it's right there.
Yeah,
and it's just like
you know what? I don't use this button very often, but Miami is boring.
It's like, cool for sponsors, cool for the broadcast, makes for cool images, but like, are we going to say that that's going to be the best race ever? And it could be. I could be wrong. It could be like the funnest race of all time. I'd be willing to give it a chance. I'm just saying, if it comes to the decision makers, street racing is, in my mind, and I've written about this before, is only going to get more and more difficult as we as a society continue to grow and have more access to social media. You're talking, if you put a race in Miami, you're going to get one person out there who has a fit, starts a social media campaign, and all of a sudden we have a Boston on our hands. So, and I don't know if that's just a New England thing. You East Coast New Englanders over there.
I am not a New England. I am far from a New Englander. You are confusing me with my younger brother. You can call him a New Englander.
Does Pennsylvania not count?
No, definitely not.
What's the cutoff? Like Massachusetts?
No, I'd say a little bit like Connecticut, upstate. Kind of like New York.
Okay, well, the state that you guys border.
Yeah, but I'm not anywhere near there, so please don't. No, that's like calling me. That's like saying I support Rich Energy. Like, no, we don't. I don't want anything.
You
to do
have
with
a
New
shirt
England.
from them.
Yes, but that's just for the laugh.
Okay.
I also don't know where it is right now. Somehow I've managed to lose it despite not leaving my house essentially in the past year.
But could you imagine if it came to New England and they went to Watkins Glen? Then you would call yourself a New Englander.
No.
If one of the criteria to get in the race is you have to admit you're a New Englander, you would do it.
Okay, yes, I would.
Well,
yeah.
There you go. That's settled. That very non-logical kind of leap we made there is confirmed that Mike's a New Englander.
One last thing. F1 is going to change the start time of the race to be at the top of the hour. So instead of being 9:10 a.m. like it's been, as an example, the past handful of years, or 2:10 p.m., I guess, whatever local time is, it is now going to be 9 a.m., 2 p.m., et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that pretty much makes zero difference because the pre-race goes for an hour-ish beforehand anyway. So we'll move on to the most complicated off-season article that has come out in like 4 off seasons probably. And Matt, you told me I had some homework to do when this came out.
I tried. I'm not. Well, between because you got the NASCAR thing somewhat sort of figured out, and this seems very NASCAR-esque.
I don't have NASCAR. Listen, if you want to talk about NASCAR and start talking about charters, like I'm jumping out the window right now because I still don't understand that.
Well,
the Daytona 500 is this weekend, so tune in if you want. Anyway, the research and development portion of Formula One is due for a change based on a sliding scale from the year prior result. I know I just said that, and everybody is like, what the hell did you just say? And yes, I read this article 4 times, and I'm probably still not 100% accurate in this. But just to give you a little background, the aerodynamic testing period is about 8 or 9 weeks each year. In 2020, so last season, the aerodynamic testing period was 320 runs, 80 hours of wind on time. So the car actually, in the tunnel, having wind go around it, and 400 hours in the wind tunnel facility doing whatever it is you're doing in there, which includes downtime in between runs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that breaks down to about 58-hour days, so 50 days of aerodynamic testing. The computer portion of that with CFD is totally separate and really confusing and is not part of what I'm about to mention here. So we mentioned that. I'm going to simplify the numbers to try to make this make sense. And if I do a terrible job, you can tell me I do a terrible job on social media and I will accept fault.
Do it. He just invited you to do it, so do it.
Yes, it's okay. I understand this is confusing. So based on the 2020 championship results, Mercedes as the champion will only be able to use 90% of the testing allotted to them. So let's just pretend that 400 hours is 100 hours. Just some math can make sense in my head here. Now they only get 90 hours. On the complete opposite end, Williams, who finished dead last, gets 112.5%. So they get an extra 12 and a half hours of testing. All right, relatively simple there. This year is not a huge decrease. I don't think 10% is going to affect Mercedes. I don't think so. The cutoff is in the middle at Alpine, so they get 100%, which means no difference. And then Ferrari right below them at 102.5%, so just a little bit more, and so on and so forth. Obviously, we don't need to go through every team. You can see where they finished. It's a real small change, so not a huge difference, but obviously will help teams, maybe even Ferrari, Alpha Tauri, Alfa Romeo, those kind of lower to mid-tier teams. Where it gets interesting, and I'm not going to read you the exact number of hours. I'm going to scroll down here to 2022 to 2025 is where it gets a little more interesting, and I'll get your input here in a second. So first place, this year Mercedes gets 90% of the 100 hours or 400 hours, whatever it is. In 2022, the first place championship winner. So whoever wins the championship in 2021, in 2022, they will only have 70% of the allotted hours instead of 90%. And then in 75 for second place, the cutoff to be at 100% instead of fifth place drops all the way to seventh, where it's flat even, and then last on the grid is 115%, so just up a couple of percentage points on that end. But on the top end, it's a pretty big cut. So ignoring the lower scale teams here, Matt, if you are a Mercedes or a Red Bull and you get 20 to 30% less testing ability, is that going to impact what we talked about earlier in the episode of when you move your what you do with your available testing?
Absolutely it does. And that sounds, maybe not so much this off season, but next off season, that sounds pretty significant. And I likened what Ross Braun had said, because a majority of American sports, the off season, after you've had a bad season for whatever sport you like, your team usually has a chance to rebound. Now it's not immediate. So an example is, NFL. The Bears usually suck. We're used to it by now. One year we sucked so bad we got the third pick in the draft. So, it's rewarding the team. The NFL draft is meant to reward the teams that suck. And, we had the third pick, traded up to the second pick, drafted Mitchell Trubisky. So it's like, hey, you got this new talented quarterback, should take your team to greatness because your team was so bad last year. But now you kind of have a chance to hit the refresh button and so on. And if you had a good year, you're picking later in the draft. But, you still might get a really good player late in the draft, and there's 7 rounds in total. So you're going to find some diamonds in the rough. Obviously, Trubisky never worked out, so our time was wasted. And then kind of putting that into Formula One terms, I don't know what you said, like 115% next off season for like probably Williams / Haas. The 115%, that sounds great. That's going to be a lot of hours they can use. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to mean anything. They could waste their time. They could go the wrong direction in something, and vice versa. Maybe day 2, Mercedes figures something out with their testing and their aerodynamic testing, and all of a sudden they can kind of use their next 30 or whatever days kind of fine-tuning things. So I like it. It does reward teams who maybe struggled, but it's not exactly like a get-out-of-jail-free card of, okay, now that you have this advantage, you're going to be in the front of the grid next year. It's like you still have to work at it. You still have to fine-tune everything. You still have to find the right areas to improve, but you're getting more of a chance to do it versus the teams that beat the piss out of you all season.
Yeah, and definitely if you're in the 7 to 10 range in the Constructors Championships, you are already now definitely looking towards 2022 and onward, because you'll take that however many percentage extra testing hours you get. I'm definitely all for. If I'm Williams at that point, I'm definitely all for. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a good point, because we always have hashtags here for football. This year it was hashtag tank for Trevor. If you are the Jets, Jaguars, or I don't know who else was like really, the Bengals were really bad this year, but they already have a quarterback. But anyways, if you're like one of the worst teams, your fans want you to suck. At a certain point, if you're going to be bad, you might as well just keep losing so you get a high pick in the draft. And there's Trevor Lawrence is coming out of this draft, and he's, Greek god of football. And I wonder if we're going to see that same situation. You're Williams, 5 races in the year.
Tank for testing.
What's up? Yeah, say it's like tank for testing. If you're like, qualifying dead last every race and not showing any signs of life, are you going to tank the rest of the year and just go for the testing mileage? So that's going to be another kind of facet, or who's going to have the courage to try to work at it. Like, is Alfa Romeo going to be resigned to 8th? Or are they going to try to maybe jump up to 6th, or are they just going to pack it in and tank? So I don't know if we're going to start seeing tanking in Formula One because of this, but it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, especially in that 95 to 100% where testing is normal, of do we tank or do we try to finish a little bit higher in the standings and take that bonus money? I think that cutoff will be very interesting to follow, and maybe we'll make some sort of chart about it this year so everybody can follow along a little bit easier, unless Formula One does that for us. They're pretty good with graphics. Yeah, and in football, if you tank, it's like usually the coach gets fired and the GM maybe gets fired, or maybe the GM has been like, all right, we understand it's tough here, but now we got the first pick in the draft. In Formula One, it's kind of like a different. I mean, we discussed Red Bull and Honda both kind of taking 2008 off to focus on 2009, but in Formula One, it's a different beast too, where you have all these sponsors and commercial rights holders and whatnot that you have to satisfy. So if you are Williams, and you have to go back to Sofina and say like, hey, by the way, 2021 is gonna be really rough. We're basically going to be taking the year off, but I promise we'll be good in 2022. Like, if you're the sponsor, do you believe them? Like, are you happy with that decision? There's late. Williams' story will go ballistic.
Oh no. There are layers to it though. Like, you can't tank and risk your primary sponsor leaving you, because that is a big loss for the team. I don't know. There's a lot of layers to it, but I'm definitely on board with it, kind of on face value here. It's going to be kind of interesting to see how it's implemented. And of course, you got teams like Ferrari. You're going to try to find ways around it.
Of course. Listen, it will be very interesting to follow, and how teams, what loopholes they can find in the written rules and whatnot. And I'm sure it will be written about plenty, but we'll wrap it up there. Guys, thank you again for listening. We'll be back next week with more F1 news and musings, and let me know how I did at explaining this article.
You did great.
I will.
Proud of you.
Oh, thank you. You're making me blush. I will put the link to the actual
Fantastic.
article in the show notes, so you guys can check it out when you are listening to the episode if you want. Anyway, Daytona 500 is this weekend. If you need your fix for racing, we will do some sort of preview or review episode on that. Jess and I will. So stay tuned and have a good one.